Content warnings. This book has a lot of surreal imagery, so it's a little bit hard for me to pinpoint whether anything is a specific trigger or not. But there is quite a bit of peril, discussions of death, and characters get injured pretty badly. So, keep that in mind. It gets a little bit darker than the original movie, but it does mostly stick with that general level of stuff. So just keep that in mind. This is quickly becoming a fanfiction channel, and you know what? I am okay with it. Fanfiction is awesome, it deserves to be taken seriously, and it can really add to the source material. And sometimes it is officially licensed and published, and it's called Expanded Universe. And nobody thinks twice about it. When somebody does it for free online, then suddenly it's bad. Oh, excuse me, when a teenage girl does it, then it's bad. Because we hate teenage girls in this house, apparently. And I don't know, man, as a former teenage girl, that just fucking bites. I was caught in the I'm not like other girls phase for quite a while, because anything that seemed fun, I was like, people are gonna think it's shallow. Or I would internalize it and think that it's shallow. I don't know, I had a lot of shame around my interests when I was in middle school, and a little bit into high school as well. And it's like, that's something that leaves scars on you. Being a teenage girl just really fucking sucks in American society. And I'm not sure how old Mulan is in the movie or in this book. I feel like she's around 16 to 18 though, so she is in fact a teenage girl. Which really makes everything she goes through in the movie and in this book just hit so much harder, because I kept thinking, wait a minute, she's like a child, isn't she? Like, she's just barely like leaving her parents' house. She's just barely like entering into society as a whole. She just recently started growing up. This is a child. So yeah, the audiobook that I just finished listening to is Reflection, which is one of the Disney Twisted Tales, which are basically officially licensed fanfiction, kind of what if alternate universe style fanfiction of various Disney movies, Disney animated movies. And after reading this entry, maybe I'll read the other ones too, because like, this is some pretty darn good fanfiction. It really, like, I love what if scenarios. I love when people take characters and just put them in completely different situations, change different events, and see how that changes the characters overall. That's just really fascinating to me, because I'm often thinking, what would my life be like if I had a normal, happy childhood? Or what would my life be like if my childhood was even worse than it was? Like, what would it take to change who I am as a person? And so seeing other characters go through that is really interesting and thought-provoking to me. And as a writer, I'm also thinking about how different things will impact my original characters, and like what it would take to break them, because I'm a sadistic fuck. I think most writers are. So in this book, instead of Mulan being stabbed by Shan Yu after avalanching Shan Yu's entire army, it is Shang instead who takes the blow. Shang is dying and he's like on death's door. Mulan is watching over him, and at this point she is still Ping. Everybody still thinks she's a boy. So she is just playing the part of a loyal soldier who definitely has a crush on Shang, but does not even know it herself. That's fun. So she's standing watch. She's like, I will not fall asleep. I will not abandon him, and then she ends up seeing the ghost of Shang's recently dead father, General Lee, and he says that Shang will be dead by morning, but it's not yet his time. Mulan asks if there's a way to save him, and General Lee says, maybe if you go to the underworld and talk to King Yama. And Mulan immediately, without hesitation, is like, I'll do it. He's like, it's really risky. There's never been a mortal in the underworld. And she's like, I'll do it. And so, General Lee summons the Lee family's guardian animal, who is a stone lion in the overworld, and a regular lion, well, really big lion, but flesh and blood lion in the underworld. So he escorts Mulan into the underworld, and from there it's kind of like a combination of, like... See, I don't know a whole lot about Chinese mythology and what they believe the afterlife is like. To me, as a American, it's kind of feels like Greek mythology combined with like Dante's Inferno, because there's different layers, but the layers don't necessarily correspond to sins as we would see them. They're just like different scenarios or environments, and people get assigned to the different layers based on how King Yama decides that they need to be punished. King Yama is not God, though. He was kind of put there by the other gods to be like the bookkeeper. So he is kind of human and makes mistakes, has good days and bad days, and that will... Well, I don't know if he makes mistakes, but he can be in good moods and bad moods when you see him, and that can determine your fate. So that's interesting. I like when gods are portrayed as fallible. I think that says a lot about us and a lot about the nature of things. So the first obstacle that Mulan and Shi the lion have to contend with is this super long line, because I guess the afterlife is the DMV. She meets some of her fallen soldiers and kind of has a moment of grief that they died so young, but they seem happy and they're not really in pain, so she's kind of relieved by that, and they have each other for company, because waiting in line can take weeks or months, and they don't, or years, and they don't have that time. So she cuts to the front of the line, and like chaos ensues. But eventually Mulan gets through to King Yama and manages to make a deal with him that if she can get Shang out of the underworld by sunrise, then they both will live. But if she fails, then Shang will be reincarnated, as was the original plan, and she will be stuck in the underworld forever as King Yama's prisoner. So Mulan, being like extremely loyal to a fault, says, yes, I will take this deal, no hesitation. Yeah, one thread throughout this is something I noticed in the original movie as well, is Mulan is extremely loyal. She is super loyal to her family. She will do anything possible to make them happy and bring them honor and give them a better life. And when she joins the army, she also becomes extremely loyal to her found family in the army. So she's really loyal to those she cares about. And that's admirable, but it also gets her into a lot of trouble. When she finds Shang, Shang is a little bit reluctant at first, doesn't believe she's real, and then she like kind of explains everything, and then hijinks ensue, and they have a lot of really surreal adventures through the underworld that really test the limits of their character and bring up character flaws that were kind of subtly portrayed in the original movie, but were not really spelled out. And they are spelled out and dealt with here. Like, we go into Mulan and Shang's childhood and relationships with their parents. Shang actually gets a chance to grieve over his dad dying, which was something that was really rushed over in the movie. I didn't even realize that that was his dad until I watched it later as like an adult. So I really like that they really went into these little details in the movie that were just brushed over. Because that's one thing that frustrates me about movies is they have a limited runtime, so they cannot get into everything. And I think a lot of filmmakers nowadays try to fit like things that should be series into a movie. And when that happens, it feels really cluttered and everything just skips along and there's no time to reflect on anything or have downtime with the characters. It's just thing after thing after thing, and it can be exhausting and also boring to watch. And that's why I haven't really been watching movies lately, because I feel like it's just a trend of movies being way too eventful nowadays. And that's why I like series. I like filler episodes. I like slow episodes where characters are just talking or just hanging out. I think that's important because life isn't about going all the time. Sometimes it is, and then when that happens, you don't want to watch a movie where everybody else is also going all the time. At least I don't. I think downtime is important if a film is meant to reflect life. Of course, not every action movies exist and they have a place. Sometimes you just want an adrenaline rush. I often do not want that, so I will watch things or read things for the characters. So I like things that have a bit of a slower pace. Not like too slow. I do like when things happen, but not when they're always happening. And it can be hard to find stories that balance that. I like that this book has a quick pace, but it also takes its time with scenes and lets you feel the effect. Like, oh my god, so Mulan had to climb this mountain of knives, and that's like a perfect example. It is a long passage of her climbing this mountain of knives, and a bunch of things happen, and it's physically and emotionally and spiritually exhausting to read, let alone to experience, probably. And you really feel that, and I think how long the passages really adds to getting into Mulan's headspace as she's climbing this mountain. So that was really well done, I think. And one thing that I really like that this book explored is Mulan's gender. Well, I guess her gender expression, or like who she is as a person. So gender is a really confusing concept. The way that I understand it, because I've been doing research, I've been like looking at essays by people who have different gender identities, and I still am confused by it. It's such a weird topic. But to my understanding, gender is a combination of how you perceive yourself and your place in society and how the outside world perceives you and your place in society and the relationship between that. So that's a really complicated, really fascinating aspect of a character that I wish I saw more books get into that. And I really like that in this book, Mulan does like struggle with that throughout the book, and then also the climax happens in this like really surreal chamber of mirrors that literally just reflects and enhance all of her worst fears, and it's a really perilous, really harrowing scene. So I'm going to stop here and put a spoiler warning here because I've been talking in general for the most part, but here I really want to get into the climax and resolution and like the character arc in detail. So if you want to read this book before reading or listening to this video, this is your chance to put this into watch later and to pick up this book from the library or something. If you can find it at a library, read it at a library, because libraries need people to check out books so that they can get their funding. That's been my PSA for the day. Last chance. Spoiler warning. Okay, so the Hall of Mirrors ends with this scene where she is surrounded by mirrors and they are all reflecting different aspects of herself that for the most part embody different doubts and insecurities that she has, because the Hall of Mirrors is like this almost sentient room that twists your inner world into something darker. As somebody who's been doing internal family systems work, this representation of parts, like different parts of yourself being shown and that you actually interact with them and stuff, is really, really interesting. It's not exactly, I mean, of course, it doesn't map perfectly to internal family systems, because I highly doubt that's the intention, but parts can be burdened, and a part being burdened means that the purpose that it originally served has been twisted. So, like, I have a part whose job is to motivate me. However, because of how I was raised, that part has taken on an abusive drill instructor personality and will berate me if I make a little mistake, or if I'm being a little slow, or if I'm not doing something productive. I've had talks with this part. I've like meditated on it and had conversations with myself, and that part of me is now a lot less aggressive and a lot more encouraging. But that part has been burdened by the trauma of my dad in particular yelling at me, and teachers and stuff as well. But just this idea being reinforced that in order to be productive and to be motivated, I need to abuse myself because other people have abused me. So I internalized that, and that kind of twisted the motivation part of my brain into something more malicious. It takes work to rewire something that's been built up from childhood, but I'm working on it. So to me, Mulan seeing all these different parts of herself, but they're all like sad or hopeless or just like hiding parts of themselves and like just not happy. That to me really felt like her parts have been burdened by trauma. So she's looking at all these reflections of herself and saying like, no, this is not me. I am not my hopelessness. I am not my guilt. I am not my mistakes. And she's looking around and she has to find the mirror that reflects her true self. And it's interesting that the different parts, one is super feminine, one's super masculine, and like neither of those are her true self. Because even though she was assigned female at birth, she's always had interests that are a bit more masculine. She likes strategy and she likes roughhousing and being around animals and like being able to run and exercise and stuff. And she never wanted to be a bride. She never wanted to be a refined lady. But she still is very feminine in the way she goes about things. She doesn't do things through brawn. She kind of works within her limitations because she's smaller and less muscular than the men she's surrounded by. So her solutions don't involve physical strength. They involve using the environment to her advantage. And she's also more emotionally intelligent and in tune with her emotions and other people's emotions, which is something that like women in general tend to be better at for a variety of reasons. Some of it's socialization and some of it's slight differences in the brain, because men and women do have differences in how their brain is structured. However, those differences tend to be pretty small and in specific areas. So it's not that men and women are just completely different species, but there are differences. There is a sexual dichotomy that is not just penis and vagina. It affects other parts of the body as well, including the brain. However, those are also general trends. And sometimes somebody who has a penis has a different brain structure that makes them more closely relate to femininity without necessarily being trans. However, it can be that they're trans. And then there's the X and Y chromosome thing, and how chromosomes can be different for people, and how you won't know unless you specifically test for that, but most people don't because it doesn't really affect their life. And then there's how hormones can affect how your brain works and how your body works. Gender is really messy and complicated. So saying this is a man, this is what a man does, this is how a man acts, this is a man's purpose in society, and then this is a woman, this is where a woman goes, this is her purpose and her interest, and putting people into those two boxes does not work. And I think Mulan learned that firsthand when she tried to adopt both of those roles and learned that she was neither. I mean, she's not trans, she's not non-binary, I think. I think she's okay with being a woman. She's never expressed that she wished she had a different body. But she clearly wishes that society didn't limit her opportunities just because of her assigned her assigned gender at birth. And so she kind of struggles with that and struggles to reconcile her internal world with society's view of her. She finally finds her true reflection, which is the mirror on the floor, which reflects her wearing a simple dress with her father's sword at her belt. And she realizes that's who she is. She's confident in herself. She can be a woman and also a soldier. So she finds that that's her true self, and that reveals the way out of the mirror, or at least the way onto the next part of the test. So that was a really fascinating scene, and this book overall is a really fascinating character study into Mulan and also the Shang as well. Shang was he's not as bland as a lot of other Disney protagonists, but he's really cagey and did not reveal a lot about himself throughout the movie, I mean. So it was really nice to actually see more of his personality in the book, and to see him and Mulan build up their friendship and the camaraderie of two soldiers in battle. And the homoeroticness of it as well. Shang is a bisexual icon. And this book still continues that thread of being a little bit ambiguous with how Shang feels about Mulan, even back when he thought that she was Ping. So, yeah, Mulan's struggle with gender kind of mirrors, my struggle with gender, and I think that's part of why I fixated on Mulan so much as a kid. My mom did try to raise me in a you can do anything you want regardless of your gender kind of way. But there were also times when I was forced to wear dresses, and my grandparents on both sides of the family in particular were more traditional about gender roles and tried to force that onto me. And then in school there was a lot of weirdness about gender, especially going into middle school, which I'm sure a lot of people can attest to, because that's when you first start being aware that there are major differences. Well, I guess it starts in 4th or 5th grade. But middle school is when it really becomes a major factor, and people start dividing themselves up into boy and girl, and that frustrated me because, like, my friend groups were splitting up, and it was a weird time. And also, being autistic, I never felt like I was able to show my true self in public. I feel like my relationship with gender is complicated by my autism because I'm not as innately aware of societal expectations as a lot of people are. I don't pick up on very subtle, hidden messages very well. So I never really thought of gender as a major part of my identity. And I was confused as to why people were so hung up on it. And it's only recently that I learned that that's not normal. That a lot of people, like, really subscribe to the gender binary and are really, like, just, like, married to it. It's hard to talk about this because it's such a nebulous concept. But so my perception of my own gender is I don't really have dysphoria around my body. I was assigned female at birth. I'm okay with being perceived as female in general. But I use she, they pronouns because, like Mulan, I don't like to be limited in what I do because of my gender. I don't like that I can't go to the bar by myself or, like, go out at night by myself. I don't like that when I wear shorts at work that some of the guys stare at me. I don't like that I have to be so careful wherever I go because so many people see me as a piece of meat. And I also am really frustrated by how untreated in medical situations doctors always think I'm over exaggerating. I've had some teachers and some people at school say that I can't be autistic because I'm a girl. There's just a lot of stuff that limits what I can do. And I've never really felt the need to wear makeup and present myself as feminine, and that's alienated me from my peers throughout middle school because that's when girls started really getting into makeup. And I tried it once and I felt like I was wearing dirt on my face and I felt filthy and had to scrub it off. Not like morally filthy, just like, oh, this is literally crushed up rocks I have on my face. I don't want this on my face. Some people can make it work and look really nice and feel great with it, and that's great for them. I have no problem with makeup. It's just not something that I, sensory-wise, can deal with. And I also have always been interested in animals and bugs and, like, anatomy and things that people consider weird and gross and not topics that decent people talk about. And even, like, and then I tried to hang out with guys, and guys either see me as an object of attraction or see me as a weird anomaly. So that was mainly in middle school, although I'm starting to see a little bit of it in the adult world, sadly. High school never ends. I'm sorry. So, gender is weird and the gender binary is bad, and Mulan had to come to terms with that and kind of find a way to, like, reconcile the feminine and masculine sides of herself. I think everybody has a feminine and masculine side, and a lot of people don't like to admit that, but I mean, we all have the same parts in our brain, they're just structured a little differently between men and women sometimes. Again, it's messy when you get down to like the biology of it, but we all have the same brain generally. We all have, like, men and women are made of the same things, just arranged differently. And that's why people can get bottom surgery. We all have feminine and masculine inside of us because we have more in common than we do differences, and the differences are often more cosmetic than anything else. So femininity tends to be nurturing, more emotional, more creative, and masculine is more like protective, aggressive, logical. So it's like the left brain, right brain thing, except I think the left brain, right brain dichotomy is not as stark as popular psychology makes it out to be. However, this feminine and masculine side that we all have is something that I've seen in my own experience and just from what I know about how humans work. And those two different roles in society, they kind of make sense with how tribes could have been structured. However, there's also room in between for a lot of other roles and they're not mutually exclusive traits. Like, you can be nurturing while also being protective, and you can be aggressive while also being emotionally intelligent. So there's room in there for a mix of both in varying quantities, and also for things that just don't fit neatly into those two sides. Because they're not two sides, they're just two things. It's kind of like, it's not cake or pie. There's a lot of other desserts there. You have ice cream or like tiramisu or something. There's a lot of different options than just male and female. I feel like this got way off track. I would apologize, but if you've watched my channel for any length of time, you probably expect this. Again, none of my videos are scripted. I have a general idea of where I want them to go, but it went off the rails. Multi-track drifting. So I guess to bring this back to Mulan, she learns to embrace her feminine and her masculine side and to combine them into something that is her true self. And I think that's really great. I think that's something that if society did more of, we would probably be in a better place than we are now. I feel like all my videos always come back to society sucks and this is how it could be better. But I feel like that's what a lot of art, a lot of stories try to do, is try to show how people can be better and how we can improve ourselves. Because stories have always kind of had that role in society from the beginning. They've always been either just for entertainment. Some of them are purely for entertainment, some of them are purely for morality, most of them are in between. But stories like fairy tales and stuff have often been cautionary tales or morality tales, and that's continued to this day, usually in more subtle ways. And I think that's why when I talk for any length of time about books, I always end up with like connecting it to larger issues in society, because that's generally what stories end up doing. That's pretty fun. If you like this, please leave a like and comment if you have anything to say. I love talking books with people, so comments are welcome, always. And you can also request books. I might not get to them right away, but I read every comment and I will take requests. And also, if you want to hear more from me, please subscribe. That helps out a lot. I'm trying to grow this channel as much as possible. And it's really hard in the early days, so every subscriber is very much appreciated and really counts. And share this video if you think somebody you know would enjoy it. That's a little presumptuous of me to say, but I'll say it anyway. And I will see you guys in next week.